I was going to just carry on. I was just going to run out of the room. Woo, 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 bye. The door didn't open. That's embarrassing. Okay. Hi. I'm going to talk to you today. What did I do with the remote? This is a really good start, isn't it? There it is. Hi. I haven't spoken to you all yet, but I'm going to do that this afternoon because I wanted to get some work out of the way, and I've done that now, so I'm not going to bother doing any more work for the rest of the day. So now we can just chat after this. I want to talk to you about a bit of branding because I'm a graphic designer and it's what I do and it's something I know a little bit about. I know nothing about anything else, so it's probably best I talk to you about this. Before I start, I'm going to show you some things that I do so you know that I know a teeny bit about what I'm talking about, and I do mean teeny. I do like logos and illustrations and character designs and website designs and all sorts of various products and posters and t-shirt designs, and that's a desk mat, and there's all sorts of random little things that I spend my time doing. But I'm only really showing you these so you know that when I get to the end of this, I do know a tiny little bit about some sort of designy things. So I'm just going to skip past all of this absolute nonsense. Though this is for Trust Cancer Fund. We did this to raise money for testicular cancer. And he was like, can you just make me a t-shirt? Something about balls? Sure. And this one was my favorite, like gonads, like this sports team. So we did that. We raised a bit of money, and that was nice. But there's loads of, so you get the idea. I wasn't expecting this to go on quite as mine. I didn't put these many in there. Anyway, I do, see now you've gone too far ahead, and now it's not going back. The remote stopped working. Bye. Hold on.
It only goes forward.
Oh, is that why?
I don't know.
That button's broken. Okay, so so effectively, the short summarized version is I do design, right? Do a little bit of design. But I want to talk to you guys about branding, because the best thing about the internet is that we all have access to it, and we can all put whatever the hell we want out on it. And the worst thing about the internet is that we all have access to it, and we can all put out anything that we want. Which means that the vast majority of advice that is shared on the internet about branding and design is typically surface level and a little bit generic and a little bit meh. And it typically refers to two things that I feckin' despise. One is studies that were conducted in the 90s tend to form the vast majority of posts that are now regurgitated 20, 30 years later and preached as truth. And also, because it's quite general, it's applied. Generally, the design advice is meant for larger companies. It's meant for businesses that have multiple touch points. They have tons of employees that have to work with the same brand assets, and the psychology behind their design varies vastly from the design that should apply to you guys. We're all smaller little outfits. A lot of us are just one-man bands, or two, or three. We're tiny little outfits. We can adapt more, we can be more malleable, we can work a lot quicker, and we can just test things out. So I don't like advice on the internet because I think it makes people overthink things. I think it makes them procrastinate, and they're too afraid to just try some stuff, get some designs out there and try it. So today's talk is going to be called How to Brand Yourself When It's Just You on Your Own. No one else is coming to hand you a magic wand to miraculously sort out your visual identity, so you're probably going to have to do it yourself. So let's figure out how to do that today. Yay! But that's a bit long, so I called it this instead. So these are all the types of things that us as business owners tend to have designed for ourselves. We've got little mock-ups of things. We've got merch. We've got logos. We've got color palettes. And we've got PowerPoint templates and a whole range of different things. And when you're just starting out, you've got to figure out how you're going to put all of that together for yourself, because the vast majority of us are kind of bootstrapping some stuff, and we can't really afford to put it out to people like myself. So you've got to figure out how to do that yourself. So this is the kind of thing I want you to understand today. So if you've either put this stuff together for yourself, or you will update it in the future, or you will be advising a friend on how to do it. And I want you to understand how to go about doing this. Not so much the actual design stuff itself, but the thinking behind it, so you can then approach it better yourself and go, I'm stepping out of frame of your thing, all right. Right, so I want you to reframe the way you're thinking about your branding, essentially, right? Today, I want you to imagine all of the various little things that you put out into the world, all of your little brand assets, right? And that could be today as you're talking to someone. It could be a post you put out on social media, an email you send to somebody. They're all little bits and pieces that build up your brand perception. So I want you to think about all of that stuff today very differently than you have done in the past. And I want you to ignore anything you've ever heard of in the past that might have made you overthink what color I'm going to use for my branding, what fonts I'm going to use, how I'm going to approach my logo, any of that nonsense. Throw it all in the bin, and let's think of it slightly differently today. I want you to think of every single thing that you put out into the world as if it is a little mini trailer for your movie, right? So whatever you put out into the world, whatever your service is, it's the full cinema experience, right? Whenever people pay for a ticket, they sit in the cinema, they get the full surround sound, IMAX experience, the popcorn, the drinks, the full thing. That's the service that you're offering people. And in order to get them to buy a ticket, to get them into the cinema, you want to show them loads of little teaser trailers that are going to make them think, oh, damn, I really want to see that film. Oh, and you think of all the different ways films advertise themselves now. There could be a poster, they could be on the side of a cup at Burger King, there could be an artist that's been commissioned to write a song for the film. There's all these little teasers that are telling you enough about the film to get you excited enough that you're going to want to buy a ticket to then go and see it. And that's how I want you to think of everything that you're putting out into the world as a little teaser trailer. And the reason that I'm telling you to do that is because I want you to grab, if you have, this button hates me, if you have a pen and paper, it might look like something like this. If you don't have something like that on you, grab your phone, and I want you to physically type or write down your favorite movie, right? And I want you to physically type it or write it so it's strong in your head, and that will make sense in a little bit. Now, if you can't think of a single film, there might be like 2 or 3 films in your head. I've got a list of about 10 or 20 films that would all be competing for my favorite. I want you to think of it like this. If you're struggling to think of one definitive movie, think of the one film that just lights you up inside when you think about it. It's just the most exciting film. It got you excited as a kid. Whatever that emotion is that film gives in you, and you think to yourself, I would love people to see me the way I see that film, that's the movie you're choosing, right? So if there's one movie in your head, and you think, I would adore it if people thought of my brand the way I think of that film, that's the film you write down. There's laughs because some people are thinking of porn. This is disgraceful. You should be ashamed of yourself. So has everybody got a film in mind? Written it down, thought of a little film, right? I just want you to keep that. I want you to keep that in the back of your mind, and I'm going to tell you very quickly about mine. This is my one. It's the 1989 Tim Burton Batman movie. Now, I'm quite old, right? So I was born in 1980. So when this came out, I was 9. And a 9-year-old me was just discovering drawing, like illustration. I was just getting into figuring out how to draw things. And this was the coolest human on the planet as far as I was concerned. So I started collecting all the comics. I was drawing this guy in numerous different poses, trying to figure out how anatomy worked and how you could actually draw it. And I was just beyond obsessed. And then I heard that a movie was coming out. Like insane. The excitement was palpable. It was dripping from the walls in the officer household. But I couldn't see this because I was only 9 and it was rated at 12 when it came out. And if you remember back in the old days when a film came out in the cinema, you couldn't see it on VHS for like 2-3 years afterwards. Horrific business. So I wouldn't have seen this until I was about 11 or 12. But this is the most excited I've ever been about potentially anything ever, and it's never been replicated, which sounds tragic, but I think it's true. It's never been replicated. So I get really excited about this film. There's another film as well, which I adore more than most other films, and it's Airplane. I absolutely adore this film. But for the purposes of keeping this concise, I'm going to choose Batman for my film, right? And I'm going to show you how you can take your favorite movie and use it to inform how you can build your own little brand around that movie, right? There's 5 different things we're going to look at. The first one is the hook, right? And I'm not talking about the crappy way people online talk about social media hooks. You know, you got to hook people in the first 10 seconds. I'm not talking about that nonsense. I'm talking about how a trailer uses a hook. In other words, they've got a movie to promote. The movie lasts an hour and a half, 2 hours long. There's a lot to fit in. They need to condense what that movie is about pretty succinctly to get you interested in it. And then they'll tell the story around it, right? So I want you to figure out your hook. Not how you're going to start a social media video, but what actually hooks people in to being interested about what you do in the first place, right? Now, we all know what we do. We all know the very basics of what our job title is. That's not interesting enough. If you're being introduced to somebody at a party or at a networking event, you need to be able to not just introduce yourself and tell them what you do, you want to be really good at hooking them. And I want you to figure this out in 2 very specific ways, right? First of all, what even is the point of this, right? That's the point of the hook. But you want to be the person who does X for Y in a way nobody else does. And you'll have heard people talk about this a lot. I'm the person that does this, but I do it in a very unique way. And the real truth of the matter is that every single one of us does something that millions of other people do. So trying to find the unique way is almost impossible. When people talk about their USP, it's probably something a million other people have the same USP for, so it's tricky. So you need to explain to people, I do this, but in a very interesting way that conveys a little bit of emotion and gets them hooked into what it is you're offering. And the way to do this is to build emotion, right? So for Batman, he helps the innocent feel safe by channeling unresolved trauma, right? I'd say that's probably a good way of describing what he does. If I was going to introduce myself to someone in a very bland, typical way, I would just tell them what I did. I would say I'm a graphic designer, I'm an illustrator, and I'm a creative strategist, right? That's crap. Millions of other people do that. It tells you absolutely nothing. This is what I actually do that I think is different to, this is going to fly in a minute. Click, do the things. Do the things. Boop. Okay. This is where I think I separate myself from most other people who do what I do. Is I spend way more time getting people to understand exactly what it is they're offering and who they're offering it to. Once they understand it backwards, it's so easy to build all the visuals around that because there's a proper story around it. Once you have a real story that you understand, people you're explaining it to understand, you can build visuals so easily around that, and you get everyone's buy into it. But again, this isn't very interesting, right? So once you kind of figured out what it is you do, which you'll know, and what it is that makes you that little bit different to everybody else who tells you they do that job, then you need to figure out how to sort of explain that in an emotionally hooky way to people, and you need to figure out how to do it in 2 different scenarios. A day like today, which is not necessarily, it's not a networking event, but imagine you've gone to a networking event, a businessy networking event, and you have to introduce yourself to people in that room, right? We've all been in that scenario before. They're typically horrendous. But rather than just introducing yourself as I am Dave and I do this, you want to think of a way of doing it so you convey an emotion within that person that makes them, they are brimming with questions once you stop talking. So you need to figure out a way of describing what you do that gets that person just immediately wants to ask you a million questions to follow it up. Once you figure out how to do that in a business setting, you should also be able to do it in a social setting. So when you go to a party and you're having some drinks and a friend has invited a new person, and we're all scared of new person, but we have to talk to new person. A new person comes along and says, oh, what do you do? And you go, oh, Jesus, okay, I've got to explain what I do. In that scenario, that person doesn't care about what you do. They're just trying to make some small talk. In that scenario, if you can also describe yourself in a way that has that person brimming with questions, then you are more informed about what you do and able to sell it better than 90% of anybody who owns a business. I encourage everybody to be able to explain themselves in a networking setting in a way that gets people just asking loads of questions, and in a social setting in a way that gets people asking questions. They're two completely disparate audiences, but if you can do both of those in a really engaging way, you understand what you do and are able to explain it better than almost anybody else who owns a business. And it's honing those two little skills, and it's two little sentences, two little stories that they're so strong. So for example, on a day like today, and I haven't done it yet because I was giving this talk obviously, and it would have been weird if I did this earlier. When I meet somebody new at a networking event, rather than say, I am a graphic designer and I am an illustrator, because a million other people can say that, I introduce myself kind of like this. I say, right, so I'm a graphic designer and an illustrator, but you know when people are starting their businesses or they're trying to rebrand, they generally come to me and they've got a blank canvas to work with. They need the visuals on what they're doing, and they have no idea how to take a blank canvas and turn it into something that's really going to speak to people. So like, I just adore working with them to make them figure out what it is they're offering, who it is they're offering it to, how you can build a story around it and make it really resonate with the people that they're actually targeting. And once we've done that, we can create these amazing visuals that tie the whole thing together, and suddenly you've got a target audience that really resonates with the brand, the story, the visuals. You bring it all together, and the person you're working with who's created their little business baby, you've put some awesome clothes on the business baby, and you watch them light up as you take them through the journey, and the whole thing is just so pleasurable. I adore it. And generally explaining things that way will trigger a hell of a lot of questions afterwards, rather than just, oh, you're a graphic designer, cool. And if I'm at a party, and I'm meeting someone sociably, and they don't really care about what I do, but they've come up to me because we each have 5 minutes to kill, and we're in the kitchen on our own, and no one else is coming to save us. So what do? With them, I would say, you know when you go into like a shop, like a supermarket, and you look down the aisle, and you see all of the products, and you see all of their packaging, and their logos, and their colors, and you're compelled to go to one more than some of the others. And then sometimes you go into a bookstore, and you see a load of book covers, and you're compelled to go to some of those than you are some others. And sometimes you're walking down the street, and you'll see like posters for a gig, and you're compelled to look at some of those more than you are some others. Or you're walking down the street, and you see some posters on billboards, and some of them will grab your attention more than others. Yeah, I do all that. And that is a way of getting that person to go, oh, sorry, what? What? I have questions. So your hook is to get people emotionally interested in what it is that you do. And you've got to figure out a way of doing that dependent on the audience you're talking to. And just sort of taking some time away to figure out, how can I actually introduce myself at a business networking event that is far more intriguing, far more interesting than just my job title, essentially. People don't do this. Nobody takes the time to actually think this stuff through. How would you introduce yourself at a business networking event and how you introduce yourself at a social gathering are two completely different things. But if you can come up with two compelling ways of describing yourself to those two different audiences, you can describe yourself better than most people can describe themselves. And off the back of that, you can do a lot of interesting things, right? So then we can get into the visual style of things. So you've kind of figured out your hook for your little series of trailers that you're going to be putting out into the world. Now we can look at how we can translate that visually. Now, if I go back to Batman, I didn't realize this until I thought about this movie analogy thing about a year ago. Batman is black and yellow, right? And I adored this, and I grew up being slightly obsessed with it. I didn't realize until I was working all of this backwards that my site has always been black and yellow. And I hadn't really thought about why. I've just always liked black and yellow as a combination. And I've had the doodle juice thing for about, I think I thought of it about 14 years ago, but I've started developing it maybe like 12 years ago, and it's just always been black and yellow. No reason. I don't overthink stuff at all, to my detriment a lot of the time. But this is just, I like black and yellow, this is going to be black and yellow. And I threw it on, and I didn't actually think much about it until I started working back this analogy, and I think, I know why I've chosen that. I think I know why I've chosen that. It's just because I like Batman. Colors. I'm going to talk to you very briefly about colors. This is one of these things that stifles people when they're thinking about building their own brand. They get into the world of color, and they think, I don't know where to go with this. And it's one of those things online where a lot of nonsense is peddled. Try You will have seen something like this, something to this effect you will have seen online, where someone talks to you about the psychology of color, right? The next time someone shows you this, I want you to slap the bowl of unseasoned quinoa out of their hands and ignore anything that follows it, right? This is one of the most unhelpful pieces of advice you will ever see, but it sounds lovely. And this has been regurgitated millions of times online in various different formats, but it misses one very crucial piece of information. There's no context. There's an interior designer in the room, are you? Hey! Right, see if you agree with me on this, right? These colors can mean these things when they're seen in isolation, but they're rarely seen in isolation without some added context to them. I'll give you an example. Pink can mean love, kindness, innocence, femininity. If I've just been commissioned to design the look of some nuclear warheads and I make them pink, all of a sudden, pink doesn't mean love, kindness, innocence, and femininity. It means death and destruction, because I've added one extra bit of context to it. Now it doesn't mean that anymore. So when you look at all of these colors in isolation, if they're just here, and there's nothing else giving them any other meaning, then yes, they can mean these things. But colors will never just be seen in isolation. It's about what context you bring to them, right? So essentially, all of this, and again, this is one of these things that's taken from old studies, so a lot of this will have changed, because for example, blue means trust, right? I can't remember the last time I looked at the Meta or the Facebook logo and thought, blue, trust. I do trust Zuckerberg because he's made it blue. No, instantly, blue doesn't mean trust because it's got that agent associated with it, right? So with one added bit of context, they no longer mean these things. Like even in specific industries, trust can mean blue in finance, but if you put it in hospitality, suddenly it feels cold. So just adding one extra little bit of information to a color completely changes the meaning, right? So I'm not trying to confuse you with this. All I'm saying is ignore stuff like this and just try stuff, right? Because the meaning is subject to context. It's subject to cultural differences. It's subject to subjective differences. There'll be some people who just don't like orange because some childhood thing happened to them and there's no explanation for it. You can't deal with stuff like that. So the good news is, I don't think you have to overthink a lot of this crap because it genuinely, typically means not much, right? So I don't think you have to worry about it too much. Same goes with fonts, right? Now, I have developed entire font systems from scratch for people, but when it comes to stuff like, when it comes to me and you, and we're tiny little teams, we just need to get things out there, we just need to go, it's again another thing you don't need to overthink, right? If you're just starting a business, you just want to get going, you just want to throw some stuff together on Canva, you don't need to overthink these things. There's the old rule of thumb when it comes to the two main different types of fonts, is you've got serif fonts, right, which are the fonts that have these little flicky bits around them, and then you've got sans serif fonts, which means they don't have those bits, right? It's a very complicated world, but that's literally the two main differences you need to concern yourself with. And the only real difference you need to worry about is serifs are generally used to convey a sort of a classic, traditional, a slightly more high-end look and feel, and sans serifs are generally used for some stuff that's more modern. And you can either, if you really want to lean into something that's a bit more classic and a bit more high-end, you have two different types of serifs, or you have two different types of sans serifs if you're really going in on just being modern. Or if you're not really working strongly in either of those ideas, then you can mix them. You can have serifs together with sans serifs. But again, it's something you don't need to think that much about. Us, in our tiny little worlds, just need to experiment with stuff and put it out there. There's 3 really useful sites you can use to pair fonts. And this is a really good example of one that you can just see real-world uses of font combinations. And then you can take all of those and just download them and play away, right? So it's really straightforward. The third thing that you can take when thinking about applying your little trailers out into the world, is how to use the lead actor being you. So obviously, if we are just one-man brands, or there is one or two of us, we need to show ourselves, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean putting yourself on camera and on video, because I know for a lot of people that's the worst thing imaginable and you don't want to do it. But at least showing your face somewhere. There's loads of studies that have been done recently, as well as in the past, about, and there's loads of web designers in the room, right? So you'll know that putting a face on a site has a massive difference on how people interact with that site, especially if the site is looking at a CTA. If for some reason it just helps direct people to that. And there's a bit of there's more trust comes with being able to make eye contact with someone, even if it is just a 2D version of a photograph of someone, makes a massive difference. So just using yourself or some sort of imagery that conveys personality is a massive trust builder. So you've got to be willing to put yourself out there in some aspects. Doesn't necessarily mean putting yourself on video, just the occasional photograph, or even just the way you talk to people, making that your personality. Massive difference. This clicker hates me, I'm sure it does. Right, the voiceover for the trailer. This, again, is the thing that's going to differentiate you from other people who do what you do. So you know what your hook is. You know how to describe what you do in an emotional way, a slight little emotional hook. You know the movie you've got in your head that you've had from the very beginning and how it talks to you and how you would love that to be the way people think of you when they come across your stuff. I'm going to show you a couple of taglines, right? And you're going to know the movies pretty much instantly, I would imagine, because that one is... that one. Spark. That one. Alien, yep. And that one. Okay, that was a curveball. But I thought some of you might get that one. 40-Year-Old Virgin. Right, so this is mine. You think I design it, the world doesn't stand a chance. Generally, when creating like a little tagline or a little thing that just wraps up everything that you do, if you can make the person you're working with the hero at the beginning, so you're talking about them first, so they think it, right? I want people to think they've got the idea, they've got the business idea when they come to me. So it's all about them, right? I'm secondary, I'm always secondary. You're the one that's come up with this. I'm just helping you visualize it. So you think it, I design it, and together, the world doesn't stand a chance. Bringing in the Batman analogy again, I want you to think of this as, you come to me and I just solve your problem for you. I'm just beating the living crap out of whatever this problem is, and we're going to take it together. So think of a cool little tagline that wraps it all together, that brings your personality out, but also frame it as that film. Keep that film in your head, right? That film, how did they describe themselves? How would I describe myself if I wanted to convey the same feeling? And you'll nail it. And then the call to action at the end. If Star Wars were to have a call to action, it would be join the rebellion, I reckon. If Anchorman were to have one, it would be stay classy, start here. If it was Pretty Woman, big mistake, huge, unless you click here. Jurassic Park, Unleash the Beast. Open your inbox, open your heart. Dumber and Dumber. So you tell me this is a chance. We're going to need a bigger strategy. Take the red pill. But for me, it's brief me, I dare you, which brings that a little bit of risk involved in there. I like people who are up for taking a little bit of a risk in what they're doing, and they're willing to try some interesting things. So brief me, I dare you works into that quite nicely. So the 5 parts are figuring out your hook. I keep clicking this, hoping for stuff to happen. The visual style is not overthinking stuff. Also, people tell you that rather than just choosing arbitrary colors, you should have a little bit of a reason why you're choosing them. And the reason that I'm bringing the movie trailer or the movie analogy into this is, if you have this really strong feeling towards a film, and there is a main character in there that you absolutely adored growing up, and you think there's one scene where the female lead walks into the bar, and it's when her character changes. It's when everything just changes. All of the trauma that she had when she was a kid just fizzles away in this one moment when this one thing happens. And when she walks into that bar, she's wearing this top that has this green graphic on it. It had this like green-pink graphic on it. And everything about that scene where she comes into her full character just absolutely speaks to me. And I had to have the color she was wearing when that moment happened, and that's why my brand is that color. Being able to just tell someone, rather than, why did you choose that green? Oh, I just like it, I saw it on a thing. If there's a little bit of a story behind it, it gives you might never have to tell it. Someone might never ask you why you've chosen that green. Chances are they won't, because no one cares but you. But if someone ever does, it gives you the confidence knowing that every single decision you've chosen, there is a reason behind it. And the reason behind it is because you want to evoke that feeling in other people. And you can only do that by giving yourself the full confidence that I have chosen that because I know it makes me feel feckin' incredible, and I want it to make you feel the same. Rather than just choosing arbitrary things or looking at psychology charts that mean nothing to you, right? You have to choose something you already have an emotional connection with if you ever stand a hope in hell of conveying that emotional connection to anybody else, which is why I've chosen, because everybody has a favorite film. And everyone's favorite film does have a special meaning to them. Whether it's a nostalgia trip, it's because they saw it when they were a kid and it just changed their perspective on certain things, or they saw it at some point in their life where stuff was just going quite badly and it just gave them a little glimmer of hope. The voiceover is how you speak, find your unique tone of voice, and then put your call to action together to wrap the whole thing together. So I wanted to talk to you about branding today, and a lot of it is to do with design, right? But the vast majority of people aren't designers. But they are all completely capable of understanding this stuff. And if they ever want to do it for themselves, I like to try and frame it in a way that people are going to understand. Either so they can just do it for themselves while they're working on building their brand up to something more meaningful, or when they've got more money and they can pay someone to do it. Or they're ready to brief someone immediately and they just want to understand a bit more about their visualizing. But mostly, you and I don't need to overthink this stuff. We don't need a big brand guidelines thing. We just don't need it. It's just us. Brand guidelines are there when you have massive teams that need to be dipping in and sharing the same language. We don't need any of that nonsense. We just need to come up with a set of assets that really speak to us, because if we're not confident in them, we can never communicate that confidence to anybody else. So you need to have an emotional connection with it. You almost need to screw everybody else at the beginning and just, how am I going to get an emotional connection to this? Because as soon as I have it, I will own it, and I will share, you will just shine the fact that you're confident in it and everything that you put out there. And none of this other psychological, color psychology or any of that bollocks, that doesn't matter to you. So don't use it to stop you making a decision. Just make a decision that feels right and move on. And I think that's kind of it. Yeah, that was all. Cheers.